Regular meeting of your Danville City Commission to order. Today is Monday, October the 14th, 2024. The time is 5:30. I want to welcome you all to this City Commission meeting and an opportunity to see your city government at work. On our agenda this afternoon, we have Girl Scout Troop 5147 who are going to come up front and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. And we're going to have prayer led by Commissioner Kevin Cottle before we have the pledge. Commissioner Cottle, you all come on. Yeah.
This way, all the way up here.
Yeah, City Commission.
Right, all the way up, all the way up, where the flag is.
Join me in prayer, if you desire, please. Heavenly Father, we thank you once again for allowing us to gather here to do the business of the city. We would ask that you have us conduct ourselves in a way that's pleasing to you and help us to remember the reason we do this. A large portion of it is for the young people behind me. Please be with them as they go on their journeys. In your name we pray. Amen.
Yeah, well, should we give him one? Yeah. All right, go ahead, go for it. Could I have one of the troop leaders to come up and tell us where you guys are, where you conduct your meetings? Are you from the local groups? And then we have a little pin for your lapels that we'd like to share, which is called a key to the city of Danville. Okay?
Okay,
Yes,
we
ma'am.
are Troop 5147, and we are in Boyle County. And right now, we're meeting. Last year, we met at the library, and we meet at any community area that will have us, Morning Point Activity Center, that nursing home. Right now, we're meeting at Intercounty Energy Building, the community center, community room there, and we meet every week, and we try to help out the community every way we can. And we are working on a badge called Celebrating Community, and so we learned about the flag and our community. And tonight, we're going to be here for a little bit to listen to a meeting, and then we're going to head to the firehouse to do a tour of the firehouse next. So we're very excited.
Yeah, they're gonna leave us to go to the firehouse? How dare you girls to do that? Wow.
So yeah, we're excited to be here.
We
Do you want them to come up, or do you want to stay here? I want to say 16.
Commissioner Collar would help you, ma'am, but he's. I want to thank you all for coming and sharing with us tonight, and we hope you'll see how efficient your city commission attempts to operate. This is local government. So we'd like to entertain a motion to approve the agenda with some amendments that I'd like to make. I'd like to omit item number 14 and 15, remove those from the agenda. I'd like to change item number 5 from an action item to a discussion item. And then number 6, the municipal order 101402 should be 101401.
I have a question. Are we going to discuss the food truck ordinance? Or I didn't see it on the,
No, I will cover that during the city manager report.
Okay.
But I spoke with the interested party and the concepts that was being discussed didn't require an amendment to the ordinance?
It didn't or did?
No, and I'll go over
Okay.
that here in a
But
little
you'll
Okay,
explain
thank
that
you.
to us, right? Okay, good, okay. So Chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank both of you. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the agenda as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, thank you. So at this point in our agenda, the next item is to hear from our public, hear the public. At this gesture in our agenda, you're only allowed to speak to your city commission about items that are on the agenda. Later on, there's an opportunity to speak to us about things that are not on the agenda. So if you so desire to speak to the commission about items on the agenda, please raise your hand, be recognized, come to the podium, identify yourself, and we give you from 1 to 3 minutes to speak to us. We just listen, and there is no response from the commission tonight. So anyone? Again, thank you all. So the next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes of the previous meetings. Chair would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Thank you, ma'am.
Second.
Thank you, sir. Any questions or comments? Any additions or deletions to our minutes? Hearing none, Chair would call for the question. All those in favor of approving our minutes as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed likewise, motion carries. Thank you all. Thank you all. Next, we have a presentation by HDR, lead and copper presentation, the removal of those things from our system, right? Now, I'm gonna get this name all messed up, but it's Amira?
Amira Palacios.
Oh, I'm glad you tried it, Mr. Curry. You're good, okay.
Got it.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you all. I just wanted to kind of give you all an update presentation, and have HDR come in and give you the current standing on our lead and copper program for the city of Danville. If you recall, back in June of this year, we brought HDR under contract to deliver the lead and copper program for the city of Danville. And at the outset the goal is to essentially establish the current assessment and plan development for the program overall, with an October 2024 deadline, we're at the cusp of it right now. So we've got, I wanted to also mention, and there's a couple of slides in here that talked about funding, and wanted to capitalize on the fact that we as the city of Danville, we've been very proactive on procuring funds for lead and copper. You've heard me talk about it for quite a while now. You hear me talk about this and PFAS, and you're probably tired of hearing about it. But I want to just bring up some of the funding line items that we have already procured for this. We got $3.25 million for inventory removal and replacement. The lead service lines, obviously, we're adhering to the Clean Water Act requirements, the EPA and DOW. And then we've got another $1.24 million set aside. Similar situation with the Clean Water Act and EPA. Those are two different funding line items with two different project descriptors, because we wanted to go and seek funding in two different fiscal years. So that's where those two came from. And then we've got the $214,000 that's helping to facilitate HDR's contract in developing this program for us. So just wanted to mention that again, and then give a little.
Marshall, could I interrupt you just a second?
Yeah.
I was wondering if you can kind of explain why we don't want lead and copper for our young folks here?
Yeah, and she's got,
Oh, you have that? I'm sorry.
well, but I mean, you're right.
Be quiet and sit here.
You're right. At the end of the day, I mean, you hear the word lead and your knee-jerk reaction is, oh my goodness. Well, there's lead in a lot of things in nature, and it's in kids' toys over the years. It's in jewelry. It's in a lot of different things. And what the EPA has done is really taken a proactive attempt, over many years, but a more proactive and concentrated attempt in recent years to address lead and copper in our drinking water line, our service lines, essentially from the main to the meter and the meter to the house, right? And all this kind of harkens back to plumbing requirements. Back in the day, it was all about I think it was January 1, 87, right? 88, sorry. Pre-88, you know, there could possibly have been lead in the service lines. Well, post-88, that was deemed illegal, right, from the plumbing code standpoint. So a lot of what we talk about today is pre and post 1988. So, and just from a national standpoint, you know, there's probably, I think I've seen numbers somewhere around 150,000 different water service providers across the U.S. that are going to be affected by this. So we're not the only show in town necessarily. We are the only show here in town, but nationally, this is affecting a lot of folks and a lot of water providers across the U.S. So we want to kind of give you a summary of where we are today with the City of Danville. And with us, we have Ross Guffey with HDR. He's an engineer with HDR, but he helps us from a lot of technical aspects with HDR in our water service provisions throughout our system. They have a hydraulics modeling program that anytime we have a new subdivision or a new development come online for the City of Danville, he plugs that into our hydraulics analysis, and we use those pressures to determine whether or not our system can service and provide adequate water provision to that development throughout our system. So he's key in that, and he's also key in this lead and copper discussion also. And also we have Amira Palacio. She's a senior strategic communications lead with HDR. You've heard me talk about her, I think, before when we first signed the contract with HDR, about her national presence when it comes to the lead and copper discussion overall. She's worked with the Public Affairs Council. She was the main author and strategist for the American Waterworks Association Lead Communications Guide and Toolkit. She specializes in helping utilities navigate the public notification and public education compliance for the lead and copper revisions and lead and copper rule improvements. In her national role for HDR, Amira helps water utilities across North America solve complex and technical communication challenges through branding, research, and change management. With a career spanning nearly 2 decades, Amira is a Western Kentucky alum who brings a background in print journalism, broadcast television, production, and municipal and public sector communications. So that being said, we're glad to have her and HDR helping the City of Danville facilitate this program for us, so I'll turn it over to her.
Good evening. So why is lead a public concern? Let me get into that. When I look at these young people, they're a big reason why we care so much about lead in America, because the research is very clear that there is no safe level of lead when it comes to water. And so the EPA is being very proactive about public water systems and their place and their role in this bigger community conversation around lead. Really, the lead issue is bigger than just water systems, and we'll talk about that in a few slides about just how ubiquitous lead is in our environment. If you really go looking for it, you can find it in so many places. But part of what the EPA is doing is really enhancing the standards for public water systems. And so we know for young people that it affects their IQ and development. For pregnant women, there's lots of risks around premature births. For adults, there's a lot of really not great things as far as cardiovascular systems, decreased kidney function, and causes all kinds of reproductive problems in both men and women. So for a lot of reasons, EPA is saying it's time to get the lead out. We know that the pipes is a major source for how it is found in drinking water systems. But it's not the only source, and in fact, it's probably not the main source. If you follow the FDA at all, they've had at least 4 or 5 major recalls of food, lead ending up in food. Applesauce, chocolate, cinnamon. If you go looking around for lead, it's very easily found in our environment. Other potential sources of lead, I would say that if you're a landlord or a realtor, a lot of that work encompasses doing disclosures around lead paint, right? Your local health department probably has some sort of lead-based paint program. They've been at this a lot longer, the lead conversation. You can also find it in contaminated soil, a lot of imported candies, a lot of things that people are buying online can have lead in it. Some of those inexpensive apps, Temu, Wish, a lot of that stuff ends up having lead in it. A lot of industrial jobs, people get lead on themselves, lead paint from something at work, bring that home. Hunting, ammunition, fishing tackle, old pottery. If you like to go vintage shopping, thrift stores, be careful what you buy. Those old toys at vintage jewelry, you may want to check that. Lead can be found there as well. So there's lots of lead in the environment. It's literally on the periodic table. So you don't have to look very far to see lead and how it shows up in our environment. Drinking water systems are a little late to this conversation, but it's been an issue that's been going on for a long time. And we know that the lead and copper rule, this EPA rule, has been around since the 90s. So it's not a new conversation. But if you look at all of this list of all the different ways that lead is found, I would say that lead is a community issue. It's something that more than just the water system should be addressing. It's working with your local healthcare system, your Department of Health. It's a bigger community issue. But out of everything on this list, lead paint, that's kind of the number one source of how children end up getting impacted by this. If you ever have had kids or auntie or uncle, toddler, they put things in their mouths and they're on the wall and chipping that paint, and that's how a lot of them suffer from lead exposure. So as I mentioned, the LCRR has been around since the 90s. A few years ago, because of tragedies that we saw in Flint, Michigan, where we saw a whole population of people who over time received lead poisoning. The Biden administration came in and basically said, we really need to get the lead out. And so the LCRR was a big part of that push to really be more proactive about removing lead from water systems. An update to the LCRR is the LCRI, the lead and copper rule improvements. So the EPA this year, they cycled through about 200,000 comments. It's a lot. And the LCRI became law on last Tuesday. It's an 890-page document. I actually sat down and read all 890 pages because that's what I do for fun. But I can tell you that it really does raise the standard even more. The LCRR is requiring so much from water utilities, more than what has been required in the past, I would say at least 30, 40 years. The Safe Drinking Water Act, this wonderful federal law that protects our water systems. It's been around for 50 years. It turns 50 this year. It really enhances and really makes a big ask of water utilities to do more around water treatment and distribution systems. But the LCRI, the next phase of that just went into effect, and that will officially become compliance law beginning in 2027. So utilities have a few years to gear up for that. And the takeaway is they're complying with the LCRR and then ramping up to the LCRI. As you think about these laws, the big takeaway is this is a 10-year endeavor. So the Biden administration has said you have 10 years to find and replace lead out of your drinking water system. So you have time, but it's not a lot of time if you think about this in terms of a series of projects and compliance steps for utilities to follow. So this is a federal mandate, and Danville is not alone. It's every water utility in America is complying with this rule. And what's really interesting, look at the city of Chicago. They have the most lead. They have 400,000 lead service lines. And they're estimated to take 40 years to remove the lead out of their system. It's a very long time. This is also a very expensive federal mandate that comes with some funding, but many are saying that it's not enough. And just the lead service line inventory, which I'll talk about, that piece of it is only the beginning. This is a huge documentation project that water utilities have never had to do in American history. This is a lot. you look at the LCRR, it focuses on 6 key areas. And so, number one, you have to find where the lead is, who is most impacted by this. And they're asking for water utilities to really focus on areas that have populations of children, healthcare, populations where there's those who are either elderly or fragile. And so a big part of the LCRR number 6 focuses on schools and licensed child care facilities, because this is all about protecting those most vulnerable. The second requirement, those water treatment requirements, so it's asking for water systems to look at their corrosion control program. And corrosion control is essentially an additive that's added in during water treatment that protects the pipes and the water. So that has been the fail-safe of the water industry on the lead issue. And so the majority of water systems that have a good corrosion control program are doing okay when it comes to lead. 3 and 4 focus on, once you find the lead, getting it out of the system, actually going in and doing those replacements. A big challenge here is getting the customer to consent for a water utility to come on their property and remove the pipe. Even if you offer it for free, you'll be surprised how many people decline that. And it's mostly because they don't like for someone to dig up their favorite azaleas or something like that, and they would rather their yard be left alone, even if it's in their best interest, which is protecting them from the risk of lead. But you'll be surprised. I've seen it where people just go, "Oh, that's okay. I've lived in this house long enough where I would rather you just leave it." So, 4. It's asking for water utilities to really increase the frequency of how much they're testing the water. And so if it seems like you're seeing more utilities talk about the results from water testing, it's because the law now requires more water testing and the frequency of it and how they're monitoring the results. And then finally, improving risk communication. This is all about having a better sense of transparency with the public, what's happening with their water when it comes to this issue. And so there's lots more public notifications with the LCRR and the LCRI. So if it just seems like we're talking about this a lot, it's because they're actually required to send out notices and to have a formal public education campaign with the public about how they can reduce their potential exposure. So I talked about the LCRR. Where you see that big star, we're in October. The LCRI has been finalized by the EPA. The lead service line inventory is due on October 16th. Depending on the state you're in, your lead service line replacement plan, which is the plan to actually remove the pipes out of the ground, each state has a different deadline for that. So for some, October 16th was their due date. On the state of Kentucky, it's not October 16th, and we're waiting further instruction from the Division of Water on that. But every state has a different due date for their replacement plan. And starting next year, water systems will begin to work with schools and licensed child care facilities on those plans to test the water more frequently. And a lot of those sampling plans will be due around Q1, Q2 of next year. So that's something to look forward to. As far as the inventory, yes, it is due this week. This is a major milestone in LCRR compliance. But guess what? After you turn it in, you're not done. You have to update it every year. So that information, depending on the size of your utility, for smaller utilities, you have to make it publicly accessible, but you don't have to post it on your website. So for your inventory, we're making that available at City Hall. Someone can walk in and look at the binder and search by their address what their service line material is. A big part of what is in most water utilities inventories is that utilities are still trying to find the lead, and so unknown is the far majority of what we're finding in water systems. They're still trying to figure it out. And so part of this process is taking the steps to verify what the service line material is. And based off of that initial draft inventory that every water system in America is turning in this week, we're finding out more information about what is the state of lead in water service lines and drinking water systems. but it helps establish what that replacement rate will be and what steps utilities have to take as far as public education and outreach. What else is in the inventory? Other than unknown, if you have a lead service line, a galvanized line, or in some cases non-lead, if you know it's plastic and copper, which is far majority of what you're going to find. We know that lead as a material, it's a remnant from a bygone era. You know, it's before 1986. I would say probably 20s and 30s. At one point in America, it was a common material used in drinking water systems. Not so much anymore, but we're still looking for it wherever it shows up. And so part of this compliance, in addition to the inventory, really finding where the lead is and identifying service line materials from those that are currently unknown. Treating through corrosion control is a big part of that. Really updating the records of what's in your service line inventory is, I think, will take majority of the effort around compliance and not only just finding it, but updating those records on an annual basis. The LCR is a 10-year program, so this is a huge documentation effort. Water systems have about 7 years to identify service line materials for pipes that are currently categorized as unknown. So this will take a long time because up until the LCRR, water systems were only responsible for documenting their side of the water service line. If you think about water service lines, you have the customer side and you have the utility side. For all this time, the EPA only required water systems to keep up with their side of the line. And now they've changed the rules, and now they have to keep up with both the customer side and the utility side. So that's a lot of paperwork to catch up with. So what does this mean? Thanks to really great stewardship you have of your water system, there's no outright cost around your public inventory, which is great. The work and all the rigorous water quality standards, the 120 under the Safe Drinking Water Act, that work continues. The safe and reliable water that you know to be true, that will not change with this. And then the corrosion control, which I said is the fail-safe for sort of the water industry that protects your water and your pipes currently in your community. A lot of people don't know this, but the Flint, Michigan issue was actually a corrosion control issue. They changed the location of their source water, and that's what led to the corrosion of the pipes in their system. But for communities like Danville, and for a vast majority of water utilities, they have a corrosion control plan that's in full compliance, and so lead is not really in the pipes in the system, but it's still something that under the LCRR are having to check and re-optimize that water treatment if necessary. So what's next? The inventory, yet again, updating those records, and there will be a variety of ways that Danville will likely go about verifying, what is the service line material. And there's lots of different things that happen once they start digging up the yard and starting to look at the pipes. I'm actually going to bring up Ross Guffey, one of the engineers I work with, who can talk about some of those methods once the engineers start to dig a little bit. I'll bring you up briefly.
Yes, so currently, most of our inventory update has been focused on looking at that 1988. So we've used your PVA data and various other assets to use the age cutoff. From there, we're gonna dig through records. You have over 45 boxes at the water treatment plants of lovely records to go through. To work through with that, as we're gonna exhaust all of the community records first. That's been the go-to for all utilities, basically. It's cheapest, there's not boots on the ground. And then from there, we're gonna review what we have at that point and work back to understand what's the best method from there. Sometimes I've been able to do visual inspections inside the meter boxes. There's been hydro excavates outside of those, but there are limitations with those. If your meter's in a hard asphalt area, that becomes a problem. You can't really check before and after it without damaging stuff. There's also some predictive modeling activities that have been done, so there's modeling components that we would work with and look. So that's something we'll look at, as well as sampling. You can do water sampling that is not foolproof. There's some ways because technically they, as a homeowner, if they have lead inside of their home and part of their premise plumbing, that would give you a false positive that maybe the service line is lead as well. So there are some benefits to all of these. A lot of utilities have employed different strategies on these. It is still a lesson learned across the country. You'll see in the next couple days as the 10/16 deadline comes and large communities start publicizing that have over 50,000 customers, you'll see how many people have unknowns in their system. It will be a large portion of these communities that are still, we're all kind of figuring out the best way to deal with records from well over 100 years ago.
Thank you, Ross. So part of the, putting that picture there was actually intentional because as part of the LCRR and the LCRI, if you do find lead or galvanized, water systems do have a requirement to actually give one of those to a customer, and then about 6 months worth of water, filter cartridges that go with one of those as part of that. So this is a federal mandate that kind of turns the water system into a pitcher and filter distribution program. But it's that's a measure that as you're working to actually replace the line, this helps protect the customer as that replacement is being made. And what I like about what Ross talked about is we're really looking at the most cost-effective methods that avoid some of the more extensive field digging or cutting into the pavement and things like that. They're kind of become an eyesore. And so I really like that he's looking at methods that are very fiscally conservative and really help with overall stewardship of the monies that you've been able to secure for your program. So what are other large systems or other systems doing? So Ross talked about this. You're going to see a lot of large systems, those with more than 50,000 customers, that they have to actually post their inventory online. And so even the more savvy, larger water systems, like a Louisville Water, the services over 1 million customers, they still had 45,000 unknowns. So they're one of my clients that I assist with. So we actually started their public notifications in May and they sent them out in batches. So funding is going to be a huge issue. I mean, a lot of water systems are saying, based on the monies that I have available to me right now, this is what I can do, because it's a very complicated patchwork and cobbling together of various pots of money to get this done. There's not one government source of money, which makes this extremely challenging for water utilities. What Danville has done, the money they've secured, has been very proactive, and I would say he's very much ahead. There are some utilities in Kentucky that are just kind of starting from scratch and they haven't secured anything. So they're at a disadvantage because now they will be in competition with lots of other utilities all vying for those same pots of money. Service line replacement planning is going to be a major focus in 2025 and 2026. As they find where the lead and galvanized pipes are, then they have to figure out how they will deploy monies and field crews and all of the things they have to order from a supply chain standpoint to actually get the lead pipes out. Even small systems, Springfield, Illinois, in the state of Illinois, they were required to post their replacement plan back in April. They had about 10,000 lead service lines, and they were right around, I think, over 100 million to replace that over 30 years. This is a very challenging mandate to deal with. Smaller systems, one of the biggest challenges that we're seeing is just around workforce. As you think about, making sure that you're maintaining public trust, it gets very difficult to make sure that the people that you're calling to do the work are actually representing your utility, and it's not a scam or someone who's trying to do something of a criminal nature. And so how you work with your local plumbing community is going to be a very special endeavor in small systems like Danville, because not only do you have to educate those plumbers who may not have experience working on a service line or doing the premise plumbing work that connects into a water service line. A lot of them have to learn what that is. Some of them have never seen a lead pipe and don't even know what they're looking for. So there's a lot of education just in your local workforce. And on the flip side, if you want to have a positive mindset, it's a great opportunity to think about your local apprenticeship and trades programs of your school systems. Think about over the next 10, 20 years, there's going to be a lot of emphasis on this work, and that's a great opportunity to think about the pipeline of workers that can live here and be in this community. Because otherwise, water systems are being forced to kind of like literally truck the people in and fly them in to actually help with that workload that we're going to see. Public education is also a major focus, thinking about all the different ways in your community that you can help people understand this issue and understand ways to reduce their lead exposure. And then funding, again, everyone will be going after the same pots of money. And so there's a public funding aspect to this. Some are even taking out bonds. Some are even raising rates, because of this issue. So we see a variety of ways that people are addressing it. But if you've been savvy like Danville, you went after grants and things that don't have an immediate impact to your ratepayers. So we're seeing a little bit of everything, but like Ross talked about, a lot of systems are trying to figure this out because there's no precedent. There's no manual for a lot of these new requirements and standards. So where do you stand with your inventory? What do you notice? What's the bigger number of the two? Unknown. All right, we're still figuring it out. And so there are protocols under the LCRR if we were to find lead and galvanized, what we end up doing as far as how we notify the customer, the water tests that we take before and after a replacement, things that we do to try to expedite replacement with that customer and educate them on ways to reduce their lead exposure, giving them a water pitcher and a filter. There's all these things that we do if we were to find something, but we haven't found anything. So again, this is a proactive mandate, but so much of the work is about finding, then replacing lead pipes. To view the inventory, it will be at City Hall. And so each address will be under those categories: lead, non-lead, unknown, or galvanized. And so if you're in that pot of 8,200 unknowns, this is what your postcard looks like. And you'll notice that we're really focusing on, this is all about updating records of pipes in the system. So the headline, if you're looking at the front of the postcard, we want to learn more about the service line on your property. We also talk about how the water service line is a shared responsibility between homeowners and the utility. We're informing them that it's of an unknown material and really explaining how historically, utilities have only had to focus on their side of the water service line. This is a huge documentation project for a water system. And as required by the LCRR, we tell the customer the steps that Danville's taking to identify the service line material and the inventory, how to access it, and also steps they can take to reduce potential exposure. And then we have a very lovely block of text from the EPA that we have to put on every single public notification around the health effects of lead, which is why we put an EPA logo right next to that. Wait, there's more. There's more, even more besides the inventory. So water systems have to work very closely with schools and licensed childcare facilities to begin doing more water testing than they ever have before in history, starting with testing every single elementary school in your public and private systems. So it's 20% of all the elementary schools each year for 5 years. So that's a lot. And then 20% of your licensed childcare facilities. So I say licensed because we all know someone who is maybe a neighborhood icon who just watches kids kind of, well, it's not licensed. But if you're a licensed child care provider, then at some point they'll be getting their water tested. Some other outreach, I could foresee some workshops of local plumbers to educate them about the LCRR. And a big challenge of this is identifying who's actually interested in the work. If you've ever called a contractor recently, they're all busy. They're all really hard to schedule, and some of them just are really not interested because they're so busy with their existing workload. So we have to find those who are actually interested in doing this work, and then building up that pipeline of people who want to be part of the folks that Danville will work with for what we know to be a lot of work to, find pipes, replace pipes, things like that.
And those folks would be employees of the city?
There's lots of ways that utilities are addressing this issue. Sometimes they issue out they'll put out an RFP and say, okay, if you want to work under this program, you have to become one of our qualified or certified, plumbers. And you have to go through a set of education or things like that to make sure that you can represent the city in the way that they want to be represented, carry the right insurance and bonding and things like that. So some of them do it through an RFP approach. Some of them actually just hire a bunch of them and say, these are our folks, and they give them a city shirt. So it just depends. Sometimes it's just through your procurement process. Or you can hire them direct. Just depends on, what's in your community and what contracting mechanisms will work best for Danville. Do you have anything to add, Ross? Okay. So yeah, I think overall next year you will be hearing more about water testing. You'll be hearing more about efforts to identify service line material where the homeowner has unknown service lines. So you'll be hearing more about pipes and testing and things like that, as required by the LCR.
I was going to ask Marshall a question real quick.
Yeah.
These cards go out to these 8,000 plus households. You have a designated phone line for all the calls?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, she's going to talk about it. We've got a designated email and phone contact, and then we've got a website link that we're working with Melanie on too.
And it definitely says do not call the city commission or the mayor, right?
Yeah, it's got your cell phone number on it.
It's interesting, public communication on these types of projects
Yes.
are so important because, yes, you can go to the city website and have, frequently asked questions that are there, but we all know someone who either doesn't have email or is just not going to go online. And when they call, they just want to answer. They want assurance that everything is okay and that they're safe, right? And so we've worked with Marshall on establishing a dedicated number and an email. That way we can have a organized response with customers knowing that their ask is different than other things that they may come to City Hall for. So we will be, we have a protocol around that and a way to get back to customers in a timely way, knowing that if you don't do that, what happens? People start to overthink and they're going to call all of you, right?
You get five different answers for us.
You'll get five,
Good,
right.
good.
So making sure we're all being consistent in how we're talking with customers. And then if they do have a concern, we can get back to them and make sure that we're fully addressing that. Yeah. And I think that's all I
My
had for you.
conversation with
Yeah.
My conversation with you before the meeting went real well. Guys, any questions? Guys and girls, I should say, ladies and gents.
On the card, is there another number other than the City Hall number that they'll be able to contact? Because you said there's a dedicated line, or will they just call City Hall, or it'll be
Yeah.
on the card?
We want people to start with, we want them to start with the email address that we put on our Danville inventory at hdrinc.com. But if they were to call City Hall, we do have a number where they could call the dedicated line.
Okay.
That we'll track.
Because
Yeah.
there'll be a lot of people
Jimmy go
that
get one.
won't be online to
Yep.
do that, so.
Um,
And when will these go out?
Starting on the 17th? Yep. So the EPA requires, this is a, sorry. Yeah.
They'll go out in waves, right? So they'll go out in waves.
Oh,
And then
okay.
we'll do 2,000 at a time. So I think we've got, what, a month to
Yes.
or mail those out. So it'll be a separate mailer from the billing, from our water bills. So just to let the people listening at home know that it'll be a separate mailer.
We need to probably get you three and Melanie and some other folks together and do a big press release
Yeah.
about this in our
Before
local
they go out would be
newspaper. Before they go
nice.
out, if we could, yeah.
So the EPA has special public notification requirements. They just have all those special things in store for water utilities. So at tier 1, it's like within 24 hours. At tier 2, it's within a month. And these these service line notifications are a tier 2 notification. So they only give water utilities 1 month to send them out. So between October 16th and November 15th, they have to send out all of their public notifications for their service line inventory. So it's a requirement for this year and then every year thereafter that they have unknowns, lead, or galvanized lines in their system. So, yeah.
We knew this was coming. We didn't know to what degree, but man.
Yeah.
Other questions or comments? Marshall, I want to say to you, thanks for being proactive as usual in getting our community out in front of this. We're very thankful for that, sure.
I mean, I don't know, I know we're doing it at the meeting today and announcing it sort of to the public, but it would be nice. I know they'll go to the website, a lot of people will, but if we could have maybe a meeting to where people could come in and talk to them, you know, and if we had a meeting to explain it, you know, because people won't understand it, but that's just my thoughts.
Yeah.
We've discussed having like a public meeting.
Yeah.
You know, making an announcement, press release or whatever, that's good. And then having a public meeting to let people come and do a Q&A.
Right.
You know, and then maybe not just one, but multiple meetings like that. And then, you know, establishing good communications with the school systems, right? And the childcare facilities up front, you know, early on. And then it's like Amira mentioned, you know, we need to open those lines of communications with the plumbing industry. You know, locally, that's something that programmatically, I think, is going to be a choke point for something like this. There's just only so much of that expertise to go around, at least regionally here. So you've got, you know, adjacent systems throughout, you know, various counties around this region of the state. But, I mean, there's only so many plumbers to go around, right? So that's something we're going to have to work through and be proactive in establishing those communication lines with those folks, too. So it's certainly not something that is going to be new to the city of Danville when it comes to this program. I mean, there's all these different facilities are going to be faced with the same situation.
Yeah.
Other questions or comments?
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Wow, that's. After that presentation, I'm about ready to just say, skip the rest of the agenda, right? Man. Let's go along, though, move along. Next item is first reading of ordinance 2040, dealing with Lebanon Road, zone change. Madam Clerk?
This is the first reading of ordinance 2040, an ordinance changing the zone from agriculture AG to industrial business development IBD for approximately 10.254 acres, more or less, of real property located at 3288 Lebanon Road in the city of Danville, Kentucky.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve the first reading of ordinance 2040.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, sir. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, roll call vote, Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Cardle?
Yes.
Commissioner Peak?
Yes.
Mayor Atkins?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Holland?
Yes.
Commissioner Sayers?
Yes.
Next is Resolution 2024-10-1401, True RX Contract Amendment. Mr. Boyd.
All right, thank you, Mayor. So in front of you, you have a contract amendment for the city's pharmacy benefit manager. The reason we have a contract amendment in front of you is currently the city has a collaborative relationship with our pharmacy program and our secondary advocacy program through Sharks. Due to some recent changes with Anthem's pharmacy guidelines. We will potentially could lose our Sharks Advocacy Program at renewal, which right now is a big savings to the city. It saves us approximately $300,000 a year in pharmacy costs, along with about probably $150,000 in member co-payment savings. In simple terms, what this means is that if Anthem is changing the way they structure their advocacy programs, which means at renewal, we would have a narrow scope of providers to choose from, which would potentially lose us that $300,000 in savings that we currently see now. But they are allowing us to grandfather in existing contracts. So in front of you, normally we sign one-year contracts. This is a three-year contract, but just to clarify a couple of points is we do have the ability to opt out of that at renewal this year when we go through our healthcare renewal process. So we're not locked into it, but by amending the contract now, what that does is that guarantees us, if we choose to continue with our advocacy program, that we would continue to get those savings in the future. Obviously with our rising healthcare costs and different factors, this has been a great program for us, and so we'd like to see that continue as opposed to having to go to an alternative plan at renewal in May of next year.
Thank you, sir. Is there a motion?
I move for approval of Resolution 2024-10-1401.
Thank you, sir. A second?
Second.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, chair calls for the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you all. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Board. You have the next item.
All right.
A discussion of medical cannabis.
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about this over the last year with medical cannabis. And so really it is the time to have that discussion about the workplace requirements in regards to medical cannabis and the guidelines and options that are presented to employers. Really right now, the state has established KRS 218B, which is a statute that gives you guidelines on what employers' options are with medical cannabis. Just to clarify, medical cannabis can be prescribed for a narrowly set group of medical conditions, things such as cancer, PTSD, chronic nausea. But with that, in simple terms, employers have two options. Essentially, they can choose to accommodate medical cannabis, but only for non-safety sensitive positions, positions that don't operate equipment, or do any type of safety related, job duties, or they can choose to take a position of not to accommodate that across the board within the workplace. One thing that, just to point out, the majority of our positions with the city are safety sensitive. Obviously we have a lot with first responders, water utilities as well, public works. I mean, we can go down the list. And so what staff has looked at this really closely. And so our recommendation, which is included in the policies that we will present for discussion next, is to not accommodate within the workplace right now. Obviously, this is a new statute. It does go into effect January 1st. The reason we're discussing it now is because we want to be prepared, get proper communication out to folks, whatever directive the city goes with, because we want our employees to be well informed before January 1st, so they understand the requirements with their employment, so they don't end up jeopardizing their employment in any regard. And that's why we're having this conversation now. But I think one thing that's under KRS 218B, employers are protected from any claims of litigation for wrongful termination for employees that are qualified card holders. And this process is going to include everything from pre-employment testing, post-accident testing, all of our different types of drug testing. But because of the safety sensitive nature and the large amount of safety sensitive positions that we have in the city, if you were to accommodate it, and that's why we're having this discussion to give our options, correct? If you were to accommodate it, it would really narrow it down to a select group of office and administrative staff within the city, if you were to choose to accommodate it. And so that's the position, your options that are presented for you. but employers do need to take a position before January 1st, because that's when it becomes effective.
So your recommendation is that we be a workplace-free employer?
Yes, sir. And what this would be no different than any other controlled substance that we have within our drug and alcohol policies. So for example, you may have an employee that may take a controlled substance of some nature. While that is an approved substance for medical care, it doesn't necessarily mean you can accommodate it because of those safety risks. And so that's why we feel like at this time, it's appropriate to recommend that direction until we learn more. Because this is probably will change quite a bit. This is new to the state. The state's made and I think they've done a really good job with the setting restrictions around this. But again, there's a lot to see how this is going to play out in the future. And we feel like this is the most conservative step right now, is to refrain from accommodating until we learn more throughout this process.
Again, thank you, sir. Fellow commissioners, this is a discussion item, so if you all have questions or comments for our human resource person, now's the time to make them. And he's going to come back at the next meeting or some future meeting with a recommendation from staff.
Yeah, we actually have that as a draft recommendation in our policy booklet that we're going to talk about now. It's in our drug and alcohol policy.
Yeah.
That's presented for you. So it's in there as a draft language with the recommendation in the memo that we drafted as well.
Because this was a new consideration, in total, we wanted to peel it out separate, just so that the
Yes.
dialogue specifically could be had with this. It would pass within, whatever you decide, would pass within the personnel policy amendments that we're proposing. So currently, this approach is in those policies. If you pass them as they're sitting in the future, the next meeting or whenever, this would be the policy, then that would become effective. If you want to change that, we would have to do that before you want to go ahead and pass those.
Well, I like that it's just a discussion item tonight because this gives our employees a chance to find out where we might be headed. And if
Yeah.
they want to have discussion with their supervisors or discussions with any of us, I think that gives them a chance to have that type of discussion, especially with our human resources director.
And one thing that I wanted just to clarify too is even if you choose to take the zero tolerance or accommodate in the workplace, it does not impact the access to health care under our health plan. So that is something that we've discussed as well. So that would still be a qualified, covered prescription under our health plan for those that need that. So I just want to clarify that point as well, that does not take away from access to health care the way we would structure our health plans.
This is purely related to what you can take and do your job.
Sure.
So there's a lot of medications that you can't take and operate a city vehicle, for example. So this categorizes medical cannabis as those only. That's the only impact it has. Hopefully that makes sense. But we did feel like, or staff collectively did feel like that applying it uniformly across the board seemed to be the best starting point. Rather than having a handful of positions here and there excluded from the drug-free workplace policy, if that makes sense.
Yes.
What do you do, just thinking out loud, if somebody has a prescription for this and uses it in the evenings at home on their own time, isn't it going to show up in the drug screen?
Well, and I think that's one of the things that's going to be a challenge is what is the impairment level for medical cannabis, which really hasn't been set yet. And then also, how long does that stay in your system? Because, like, if you, not to pick, have an employee that's on a rotating shift, maybe they're off 3 days before they come back, they use the substance. We really don't know the answer to that, to be frank, right now. And so that's why we want to go that conservative approach, because they really haven't set what is that impairment rating, what will show up on a drug screening as being under the influence. That's still yet to be defined, and so it's really just a lot that we still need to get clarification on, because I think they truly don't know how long that's going to be in your system. But
The beauty, the whole beauty of the situation is that it doesn't have to be under the cover of darkness. So if you have a medical card and you're qualified to use the product, then it's safe to tell HR, And it's totally okay to let them know that that's a possibility, and then let that play out over time in a healthy way, rather than as intended by the passing of the statute, rather than trying to, there's no fear with it, right? You either have a card or you don't. And if you have a card, then we administer that as we would any other medical condition.
Well, and also look to Earl's point, looking at some of the conditions, there has to be an established patient-practitioner relationship in order to get a card. And then also, a lot of these conditions that you see, not always, but, a high probability is typically someone may be unable to perform their duties anyway, so there's probably going to be on some type of medical leave such as FMLA. The probability is high. Like Earl said, we want to open up transparent communication with employees. That way we can have those open dialogue. Like if we know that someone maybe is using it on a temporary basis, we know that they can be at work, they're going to be on approved leave. We would need a fit for duty release before they could come back into that role because of the safety aspect of it. Again, we talk about like equipment operation, that's a big part of that too. And so that's why it's important that we get this out, make a decision as quickly as we can before January, because we want to be able to give people good informed guidelines so they know as they, get care or access to medical cannabis.
And you may ultimately change it once more information is known, such as what is the impairment level? What does that mean?
Yeah.
And so we'll have to accommodate
Yep.
those definitions as time passes anyway. So that, as a starting point, this felt like the best step.
Okay. Well, again, I want to recommend staff for putting it out there for us. Other questions or comments from the commission?
Have you talked to other cities around that are, do you know what's going on in that they're how they're looking at it?
We do, and we've talked to a few, and, through some of our associations, it's kind of, to be transparent, it's really just divided down the line. Some cities are choosing to accommodate, some are taking a zero tolerance. It's really not weighted one way or the other. I would, it's kind of split down the middle. Just in my dialogue with some, I think more are leaning towards zero tolerance because of all the factors we talked about, but some are choosing to accommodate it. Just because people are still trying to figure this out. And, I think one of the things that we discussed about as we looked at this is one of our concerns is how does the ADA come into play with this? Well, it's still a illegal substance at the federal level. Department of Justice is talking about changing it from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3 substance. I think I may have that backwards, but they're looking at that, but it's not been approved. And so the ADA is not applicable here, meaning you're not required to accommodate, even though somebody may have a qualifying disability, they're using medical cannabis. You're not, but you got to make sure that your policies are crafted in a defined way so people understand that, up front.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Any other questions or comments? All right, hearing none, thank you for that discussion and for bringing it to the forefront. The next item again, Mr. Board, Municipal Order 10-1401, 2024, Personnel Policies Revision.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So in front of you, there's a lot of information in here, so we're going to try to simplify this as much as we can. As I thought about this, we presented it for action tonight. It may be best, unless Earl, you want to take a different direction, it might be best to have this as a general discussion tonight and maybe come back with the final recommendations at the next meeting based on any feedback. Because there is a lot of information in here. This is a big project. We've worked on this for quite a while, and we've talked about it through our quarterly updates. But in simple terms, we've got a table of contents that you should have in front of you. And the goal of these policy amendments really were to just continue to, stay compliant with a lot of the legal changes that are coming, as well as, just continue to balance in the needs of the workforce. So really, we have 5 sections here, which is our conditions of employment, our classification plan, our comp plan, benefits, and then some of our appendixes, which includes our grievance policy and our drug and alcohol. In the packet that you would receive before the meeting, we have blue-lined all the policies. The only thing I would like to point out is all these are amendments to existing policies with the exception of one. We do have a utility on-call policy that Marshall and Earl and I have worked on collaboratively over the last few months, and so that is a brand-new policy for discussion. So, so we can start wherever you would like, or if you want, if you have particular questions on any policy, we can do a deep dive into those further. But again, there is a lot of information here that we'd like to present to you.
Yeah, so rather than really talk about random things unless you all want to talk about something specific, the purpose or our goal was for tonight, for me, was to make sure you had it in your hands, to make sure you understood what you had, and to make sure that you knew where to find the full policies. And then if you, once you had those and had your head around those and took as much time as you wanted, if you wanted to meet with Randy and I, we'd be happy to do that to help understand kind of the basis for some of the recommendations. And if that's the direction you all as individual commissioners want to take, that's welcome. If you would like to just come back in 2 weeks after hearing that, it's totally up to you. The floor is your all's, obviously, but I just wanted to make sure we tabled that correctly. We couched that correctly with what our intent was. And so you do have a table of contents. Then after that table of contents, Randy did a good job having a bullet summary for each thing that changed, but it is not the full text of the change. The full text of the change was in the link that is actually in the beefier file that was emailed to you and should be available to you digitally. We didn't try to print that because it was heavy. And then I asked him to clarify on the last, sheet that he gave you in the packet that's actually in your packet, the author of the submittal is important. Because some of those came strictly from Sturgill Turner, which is our consultant along personnel lines in that sense. And then some came from really staff conversations. And so he tried to break them out like that also. So you really had the 3 documents in your packet, and then you had the link to the total personnel policies with everything. The biggest three things we included in that email was the medical cannabis, dealing with that. But then 2, like we went all the way down to Good Friday, whether or not to go ahead and make that in a full holiday. We've included that in there now, just to talk about how comprehensive the look is. We touched every policy across the board over the course of a year, probably, in looking at it.
I mean, I'll speak for me. I would like to have I would like to be able to look at it more in depth and then approve it, because I'm having issues, and I've sent it to Ashley, but, I can't access it, so I would like to look at it personally.
Yeah, that's totally reasonable. And so I asked Randy not necessarily to try to do a massive presentation tonight. I mean, it can get very lengthy and very boring. But, so we'll do that if you want. If y'all want him to walk you through the actual text of each change, the first one is on the screen, for example. If you want to see them individually, we'll take time to go through everything, if that's what you all want, to guide you through the beginning. Otherwise, these are in that SharePoint file that was sent to you.
Commissioner Pete doesn't want that. Would anybody else want to wait 2 weeks before we have this discussion, or what?
No, I didn't. He's picking on me. But anyhow, I would like to be able
That's
to get it on
welcome.
my SharePoint so that I could review it on there.
That's totally reasonable.
Well-
And
Well,
I think it's appropriate
I want to read it.
I'll back up Commissioner Peak, and I'll move to table this till the next meeting.
okay.
and if you all would like to meet at all, we'll be happy to do that. Set aside a time to do that.
do we need a motion on that, Mr. City Attorney?
I just
There's a motion on the table, or on the floor to table.
Okay.
Now it's
Right.
seconded, so
Yeah,
you're ready for a
second.
vote, Mayor.
Any other unreadiness? All those in favor to table it, say aye.
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 Those who want to deal with it tonight, say aye. It's been tabled.
Okay, but I have a question. I don't see the blue changes
Yes, I
on
didn't.
this. So where am I going to see these changes?
In the share
See,
link,
this is-
if you look like on the example here on the screen, when you go to the share link, you'll have the changes highlighted in blue. That'll be on the edits in the,
It's in our packet, our meeting packet?
There was an email sent to
Sent
you
you
October
late, yeah.
3rd from Earl.
A
That had a
separate email.
SharePoint in it, yes.
yeah. And so what we did is we categorize those into two folders, one that HR has updated with staff consultation, and then also the Sturgill Turner updates that we did, that we talked about with that project that we started with them last year.
Okay.
And so everything that is changed is in blue, with the exception, though, I do want to point out the utility on-call policy, that's a brand-new policy for review, so that one will look a little different, but it's out, but they're all in there in chronological order based on the table of contents that you have.
So you got a table of contents, the summary, then you got identified who wrote what. I think that's important to know for you too, and then you got the full version.
The item has been tabled. The next item on my agenda is first reading of ordinance 2041 codes supplement. Did you notice that our PR person, Ms. Crossfield, left the meeting? She forgot to remind the mayor about he was to leave, ready to go to the next meeting, so I'm not being disrespectful, I'm just concerned about my time and your time too. But okay, let's go on, come on. Next item, first reading, or Madam Clerk, want to read the ordinance for us, please?
This is the first reading of ordinance number 2041, an ordinance enacting and adopting a supplement to the Code of Ordinances of the City of Danville, Kentucky.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, ma'am. Questions, comments? Oh, hearing none, all those in, oh, I'm sorry. Roll call vote, Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Peak,
Yes.
Mayor Atkins.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Holland.
Yes.
Commissioner Saris,
Yes.
Commissioner Cottle.
Yes.
Next item is city manager report.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. Would like to begin with follow-up on the food truck request. There was a little bit of confusion, and Ms. Earl is here, and I appreciate her attention for sure. We felt like we understood where she was wanting to be, and she felt like she was asking for somewhere else, and I think we miscommunicated between us. I think hearing where she wanted to be, I think she was already allowed to go to some of those places with proper staff approval. So for example, she wanted to set up at Michael Smith Park. I felt like that Parks and Rec could already accommodate that as an example, Jackson Park. We ought to be able to set up at some of those places currently because they are city property and they are managed by Parks and Recreation. I think we thought that the discussion was wanting to be in Millennium Park where the concession stands were, and we were struggling trying to figure out what to do with that. I think the other places that was important to her, and you're welcome to speak on your own behalf, but I'll do the best I can. We're like the Housing Authority, for example. Some of those sites are private property. Those are up to the property owner, so long as they're consistent with what's allowed with the current zoning. And so when we looked at it with Michaela, she didn't see anything that was in conflict with her necessarily. So it's more specifically just, we need to identify where she wants to be, and then we can approve that as staff for the most part, other than when it's on private property.
And that's just for this one organization, like another food truck vendors come and ask for the same types of locations?
The locations where that she had identified are really open for anyone. I mean, we can put food trucks at the parking lot at Cowan Street, for example, if that's where we want to permit a food truck to be as Parks and Rec, right? And so you would want to do that where you do have a shortage of access to food, whether it be for an event like concessions, and certainly special events have a lot more freedom also to locate a food truck in those. So we felt like that there was plenty of room inside of the existing ordinance to accommodate Ms. Earl's request.
That's good. Any other comments?
So you just bring back the ordinance for us at the
There's
next-
no amendment to the ordinance required.
Oh,
Parks and Rec already has permission to
Okay.
permit a food truck inside of its properties. Does that make sense?
yeah.
Yeah.
I
So like, for example, Michael Smith, Parks and Rec can authorize that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good. Yep.
That's great. And you said the director is aware and
We met
he'll
with
know
Tommy,
when.
talked about
Okay.
it, and we'll follow up too, to make
Okay.
sure we're doing it correctly and consistently.
Thank you.
Yep.
And there's an application process, that's the good thing.
He will accommodate that, yes.
Yes, sir.
Then some important dates coming up. The Fall Festival's the 19th, third Thursday is this week, 17th. 21st is a cemetery committee workshop with you guys, 9 a.m. to 11. Then we'll have another commission meeting. Halloween is the 31st, of course, 6 to 8 p.m. is the hours that those are published. Fall break was very disruptive this year because it did happen over 2 weeks. There were some school districts went the week before, and then locally it was last week. And so we hope everyone arrived back safely. We know it was a pretty traumatic experience for some that had tried to be out of town during hurricane season. And so our thoughts and prayers are still with all those folks dealing with those issues. The Parks and Rec development is the next bullet point I want to talk about. I want to clarify what City Attorney Dexter tried to communicate the other day, and I had a chance to speak with Commissioner Sears last week about what we are trying to suggest it worked for a number of years tied to the development of our parks, which was essentially, we had the Millennium Park Committee that met and came up with the recommendations, and the committee then said, well, we need to build, and I'll go back to the softball complex, is the perfect example. The committee said, we recommend building the softball complex. The city engineer at the time, the county engineer at the time, took that to our respective bodies on our own, and had a discussion on our own, where the city commission then said, well, we can only do $1.5 million towards the project. The county said they would only do $1.5 million towards the project. So then when it came back to the Parks and Rec Committee, the Millennium Park Development Committee, they had to take a $4.5 million project and make it work inside with that $3 million. So what we did was we eliminated some of the concrete work, we eliminated some lighting, we eliminated the construction of a field, and we backed the project scope up to fit that budget. And so that is the process we are trying to describe that we are wanting to go through with our Parks and Rec. And I think our Parks and Rec Committee, now, back then, it was a board, and then you had the committee. So now we've reorganized Parks and Recreation, and it's all simplified. And I want to have confidence, I want the Parks Committee to have confidence in developing a recommendation and letting the appropriate representation, Tommy, go to the Board of Commissioners here, and then go to the fiscal court and try to arrive at a point where each one says, well, this is how much we want to give towards X project development, and then let the Parks and Rec Committee make a recommendation then about the finite scope then around that so that it works. That's the way it worked for many, many years. It's very difficult when you have competing budgets, when you have different number of board members, managers have a different role than commissioners do, creating an environment where you can negotiate through that process. And so the reason the city attorney said that last week, and what I want to confirm, is that's the process that we're urging going forward, because that works and it has worked for so long, right? So I think Commissioner Sears has direct experience with that as a former Parks and Rec board member director. And so that's the process we want to go through. We're going to have to spend some time valuing our Parks and Rec Committee. We'll try to do that as staff, helping those folks understand that when city engineering or Tommy Parks and Rec Director is going to them and asking their opinion, how important it is to get it, right? And it does matter. And so then in that way, we hear it and can filter that back to the respective bodies to decide what priorities are financially. Rick, do you have anything you want to add?
I think you explained that well. I want to I want us all to be reminded what Attorney Dexter said. It's an advisory committee, and we should take their advice. So we want them to look at all the projects, the three top, I should say. That would be Bunny Davis renovation, where pickleball lands, and the possibility of in-house recreation facility. Take a look at that, recommend it. We have money, county has many, but they are a little closer to the public and certainly closer to recreation, so we want to take their advice, at least listen to it.
Yeah, and I think sometimes when they have not felt valued and we've I guess, diverged from that approach with them, I think the elected bodies not necessarily agreeing with them in total is not a bad thing. That should not be offensive. In the same way, the Millennium Park Committee had to decide, okay, well, they only gave us $3 million. What do we do? You know, how do we implement this project goal as best we can? How can we recommend to you, Josh? So then what Tommy would do is go to the Parks and Rec Committee and say, well, this is how much money we have, and this is what we're thinking with that money, and let them kind of guide him along that process so that we get more input, more feedback, and the collective gain is what we're looking for. So I wanted to talk about that for a minute and make sure that was better understood. I wanted to reiterate that because I felt like that based on some comments that Commissioner Sears received and communicated with us, we felt like we needed to say that out loud again, just so that folks were on the same page. And then the next item is, I would like to point out, unless you all want to dive into that subject more, would like to point out that we have had a history of developing partnerships with our municipal utility. We've worked really hard at maintaining those relationships. We are connected, and we have a partnership by contract in the last 15 years with, for example, the North Mercer Water District, who's now a purchaser from the city. We've developed a nice partnership with Lebanon Waterworks. We've developed a nice relationship with the Springfield Waterworks. And at this point, we're having dialogue on the 150 corridor, and I feel like that if you've been aware or recall that Lincoln County does struggle with raw water supply, and during drought conditions, they don't have that river flowing through it, that stockpile of water. And so this dialogue that we've been having has been very successful in trying to help get buy-in for what solutions are out there to help them. And so it's been interesting, and we do anticipate bringing that back as a subject with another formal presentation tied to that soon. And certainly Marshall would do that, but we want to talk about it. We want to bring that to your attention because we are working, staff is working really hard on that. It includes all the utilities that we mentioned in the 150 corridor before. There's at least 6 that are coming to the table and brainstorming. And so we'll certainly inform you more down the road as that gets legs. The Downtown Master Plan is an active project. We want to bring our consultant back to the commission meeting on the 12th. I think the 11th is Monday, but that's Veterans Day. As far as I know, we will meet the 12th, right? Yeah. So we'll try to bring him back into town on the 12th, bring him to this commission meeting, let him reintroduce and reorient the Downtown Master Plan to make sure everyone is on the same page. It has been a while since he's been able to do that. And we will try to have him here for a couple days and give him an opportunity to meet with others and so that we can recommunicate that message now that we are moving towards a different phase of the Downtown Master Plan. I think it's important to revisit the original idea, which is ultimately it's to do things that help downtown livability and help the reestablishment of downtown living. Ultimately, that's what residential growth inside of the downtown area is really what the purpose or the main goal of the Downtown Master Plan was. And I think it's confused with other small projects that come about at times. I think the collective Downtown Master Plan, it requires everyone to focus on it and everyone to work on it, everyone to support it, while an individual project may be an as-needed basis. But the overall idea of the downtown master plan is we want to make sure we define correctly, again, for everybody and recenter our efforts. We had talked about a fall symposium. Given that he's going to have a couple days here with the downtown master plan, and then we're aware that the EDC is wanting to talk about this strategic planning session. I think the mayor and I was invited to lunch to talk about it. So we will probably allow the fall to pass and focus on those two conversations first, and then follow up with a symposium in the early spring. Any questions?
Comments?
When's the deadline for us to discuss and hear from the Parks Board and make a decision on?
So the process
Those projects.
from here on out, we understand that the conversation with aquatics has to take place. We understand that. We understand that's a priority. I think everybody does. Part of the confusion is when we're talking about assembling an estimate for pickleball, it's very easy to estimate removing topsoil, putting stone down, paving, building it's much more complicated to do the preliminary estimates on a swimming aquatic center. And so it takes a lot longer. And so then when staff identified pickleball and brought that forward correctly, so the point of that was, I don't necessarily know that staff was advocating for any particular approach to it. But what was possible is that if you wanted to spend some smaller number to get started, then staff could consider, do we debt service that or do we not? Because we know the aquatics is going to require debt service. And so we were trying to have that discussion a little bit out in front of the aquatics discussion, just to try to steer us towards how big and how small this number could be down the road. If the county, for example, had conversations with us, and if you ended up at a phase one project, so remember I talked about the softball field being a partially funded first phase. If you had a partially funded pickleball first phase, it may just be $500,000 a piece or $300,000 a piece or some number that's much smaller than the total facility build out. If that's the case, then that may not require debt service. It may not require debt service from the county. It may not require it from us. And so then you would end up with an aquatics project that was narrowed in on aquatics only, for example, as a debt service issuance. So that's why that conversation bumped forward a little bit. It doesn't have to be. There's nothing wrong with simply staying on course. To answer your question, it'd take about another probably 4 or 6 weeks for them to come back to the Parks Committee. They'll present the priority list, including aquatics, to the Parks Committee, get a recommendation or get feedback and input from them. And then Tommy will do the same thing that he did with pickleball. We'll have a presentation here with you guys, and then he'll carry that to the fiscal court and then see where that goes. And then, yes, you'll 100% have another meeting, a joint meeting down the road to discuss. So you're treating it kind of like the state legislature or the federal government. The House creates a budget, the Senate creates a budget, and then you go through a reconciliation process. So we would ask that the City Commission create its budget priorities for Parks and Rec. The county create its budget priorities for Parks and Rec, and then we'll go through a reconciliation process where we merge that into a successful project.
If I may add for Commissioner Holland, because I attend the Parks and Rec Committee meeting, and I've expressed that time is of the essence. As soon as they get the numbers they need to make a good decision, to make a good recommendation, they're going to go for a special called meeting instead of sitting out, so we can start working on this actively, both us and the county. I think the hope for all of us would be something starts happening in the spring, so we need to make decisions pretty soon.
But, I mean, my concern is, I hear what we're saying, the committee is important. We need to listen to them, we need to hear what they're saying. I want to hear from Tommy. I want to hear what he's saying and what he thinks, because we hired him for a reason, for him to have that input.
And that's the reason the advisory committee is being involved because
And I
he's
mean,
ahead of it.
up to this point, they've been, bringing it to us, letting us see it. And I had hoped that we would be further along in the pool side, because the other one we have is gonna be useless in the spring. And so what are we gonna do about that? Because if we don't move on anything until the spring, then we have no pool next year probably. That's a fact, or,
Yep, you're correct to point that out, and you're correct to put pressure on it. The developing of that information is time-consuming, and I would suggest to you that Josh and the consultant feels that pressure a little bit to try to speed that up, and Tommy. And so but 100%, Tommy will be the one presenting with Josh to the Parks and Rec Committee. They'll take feedback from them, and they'll clean up their presentation related with that feedback in mind. Then they'll bring that to the
Then they
city and
will
the
all bring it
county.
back.
Yes. We understand we need to do that quicker, sooner rather than later.
if the pool is, say, we don't get around to it, or we don't get to it, I mean, I think the city commission has a responsibility, and the parks, obviously the committee, to look at what are we gonna do, not in April, but earlier, to say, what are we gonna do about that? Are there options that we could talk to different places to see in town if we could use their pools, or have it, accessible to the community?
I think what the commission would like to have before us is this. We have three options, the way I look at it. The pool is an option by itself. Pickleball is an option by itself. And to me, the third option is we put the two of them together as an option. There might be a fourth option. I don't know what it is, but I think we'd like to have all that information so we can decide at that point to pay for one and finance the other one, or to finance both of them. Right now, we just don't have the information. And regardless of where we go, there's gonna be a season with no pool in the summertime. There'll be a season without Bunny Davis as a pool option for our community. And the sooner we get past that and get that out there, the sooner we're gonna be, because to look at some other options for summer of '25 or whenever the summer's gonna be, that we can't use Bunny Davis. Is that what I think we're seeing?
And I had a question, you referred to Aquatic Center, what, is that Bunny Davis, redoing Bunny Davis?
Yeah, I
What are you
don't know
talking-
what else to say other than.
No, that's fine, I just want to make sure I didn't miss something.
Yeah, we're right.
I know
That's just what word comes in this head. I don't know.
And I appreciate that, he's working hard. I talked, at the last meeting when they presented, or when we went 3 weeks ago, when they presented, you don't want them to get frustrated either, because we've sent them all over the board. I mean, I've been here for a year and a little bit, and we've been talking about parks for a year and a little bit. We've really not moved, in my opinion. I mean, we've done some things, but I guess you just want it to move faster, especially when you see the need.
The big decision with aquatics is still looming. There's no question. That and indoor recreation.
Right.
Those are two big bites at the apple, and your competition has those, to be honest with you.
Right.
If you're looking at what other cities do, we need to reconcile those two questions as a priority.
Yeah. I mean, I know, like Tony said at the last meeting, the parking just coming into the fall at Jenny Rogers is already bad.
Yep.
And I don't know what they're gonna do. I don't know what the plan will be for indoor sports in the fall. What will happen? Where's all that gonna go? In addition to what we already have. Just a thought.
Good work, yeah. Yeah, questions or comments for our city manager?
So I heard November.
Yeah. November.
Everything's probably November. We'll decide.
Yeah, they're planning to present to the Parks Committee on November 20th, is the plan right now.
20th.
And then they'll be at the commission meeting on the 25th.
Okay.
The fiscal court doesn't meet on the 26th, I think. There were some calendars they were looking at that showed that they may not be at the fiscal court until December 10th.
You're welcome to come in. Oh, okay, all right.
So that's the plan right now. And I think the design is, to get this price, the design's happening. So we're making progress, right? We've been making progress, that it's just happening in the background to get to the point where we have the price. They sent a site plan that they're gonna be finalizing before they come on the 25th. That is the drawing's pretty well done. Now they got to get into the details after that if we move forward. But I think we're closer to bidding out a pool than what it feels like, just because a lot of stuff's been happening in the background. And that's how design works. I mean,
You're
design,
right.
it takes time, and it's quietly occurring in their offices.
Yeah, we said one time before that for the general public at large, when you see a municipality break ground on something like a swimming pool, the general public will say, you finally got started, and that's like 30% of the work left. 70% of the work happens before that. And I don't know that that's well understood. It is if you do a good job. I see Ross back there nodding his head. As an engineer with HDR, very successful. We appreciate them guys being here tonight.
He's gonna finance the pool for us, right? Okay, let's go on. Anything else from the city manager?
Yeah, just real quick. I looked for information on the Fall Festival at Millennium Park. I didn't see it anywhere. Melanie's left us. Is there anything somewhere?
Yeah, I think Melanie and I were talking about that this afternoon before the meeting, that we're going to get with Parks tomorrow and get some more information out. A little easier to access. I think there was some things on Facebook that were hard to link to and that kind of thing. So we'll try to get some information out tomorrow.
It was on the city newsletter, wasn't it?
Saturday.
Yeah.
I think
This coming Saturday, right?
we've missed Melanie very much. We're happy to have her back.
Well, we identified how much we leaned on her, say it like that.
Well, let's
Don't
lean a
let her
little
know.
further into
No,
tonight's
you
meeting,
can't tell
guys.
her.
Come on.
Thank goodness she's not
We're at the
here.
stage for our second hear the public. Seeing that no one wants to speak, anyone wants to, it's that stage for hear the public tonight, second opportunity, and you can talk to us about things that are not necessarily on our agenda. Some of you all been waiting patiently, but that's good. Seeing no one, let's move along then. Commissioner comments. Hearing,
Well, I had a compliment for Public Works. They did a great job helping to clean up the debris after the power outages and the storms. Several people, emailed and said, hey, less than 24 hours after I called, they were there. So please thank Public Works. They really did a good job.
thank you, ma'am. Anyone else? I visited city employee Alonzo McGuire in the hospital today. He had emergency surgery just yesterday. And upon my arrival, they were having a party in his room. Today is also his birthday, so happy birthday, Alonzo, and I hope you get out of the hospital real soon. There are a lot of other things we could talk about, but I thought I'd toss that one out. Any other commissioner comments? Hearing none, let's move on to the financial part of our meeting, and that is the payment of our bills. Chair will entertain a motion to pay the bills as presented.
Move for approval of the bill list in the amount of $1,522,304.68.
Wow, get that number correct. Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions, comments, additions, or deletions? Hearing none, the chair calls for the question. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, thank you, the bills are paid. Next item is utilities. Mr. Carrier, reorganization discussion. And you know you're gonna be real short.
Actually. I've only got 3 slides, so you can make any slide longer, though. So what I wanted to do is just cover a few items with you folks. If I can get this turned back on, sorry. Organizationally for municipal utilities, right? So this is the current organizational chart for utilities. You got the utilities director there, you got your billing manager. We got 3 girls that work underneath Erica here as a billing manager. We got our electrician, Todd Conger. Utilities specialist, Evie Adams here. We've got our utilities inspector, Caleb Lowry, who's done a great job for us. He's spearheading a lot of our Q&As out in the field with the contractors and watching over to maintain regulatory compliance with a lot of our construction activities on behalf of the city, so he's done a great job. SCADA administrator, we've got a special projects administrator, and the executive assistant, which right now is vacant right now. So, and then, of course, you got the different departmental heads here. You got your wastewater collections, wastewater treatment plant, water distribution, and water treatment plant here. So, and underneath those are the available employees for each department. So, wanted to kind of think about what the future may hold for utilities overall. And I guess what I'm trying to verbalize is, there's a lot of things in the pipeline coming up. You've heard me talk about lead and copper. You've heard me talk about PFAS. You heard me talk about all these different things coming down the pike from a regulatory standpoint. Preventive maintenance is another key item that I feel like the city, as far as utilities, needs to have a more concentrated effort on, right? That preventative maintenance is big in utilities, right? So what are we doing right now to curb issues in the future so that we don't have a main break in the middle of the night, or we don't have a sewer backup in the middle of the night, or over the holidays, or X, Y, and Z. So, a few, there's, a myriad of ways to do that. But what I wanted to present to you all tonight is one scenario in which we essentially create what's called a program administrator within the utilities administration line, right? And what that program administrator would do is essentially provide oversight and compliance for those critical programs. And I gave you all a printout with a draft job description here. Laid that in front of your all's podiums before the meeting started, but we can kind of go down some of the key items for that job description. Managing day-to-day regulatory compliance programs at the discretion of the director. Delivery and oversight of the LCRI program, PFAS, and another important program that I feel like we could do a better job of drilling down into and focusing on is the distribution system fire hydrant maintenance program. We've got, bukus of hydrants around the city of Danville and Junction City and out in the county and Perryville, and some of those need to be replaced in total. Some of them need to be rehabbed, right? And some of them need to be back into usability, right? So there's thousands of those that really need to be addressed and that needs to be done from a programmatic standpoint in phases, right? And working with those fire protection officials out in the county and in the cities, right? To identify those. Utility system SCADA program, preventive maintenance program, which I talked about earlier, and just overall technical support for the treatment plants and distribution, water and sewer, just essentially kind of a person out in the field that is also over the programmatic aspects. So when I say that, you got your regulatory agencies that like to have a specific point of contact when it comes to these programmatic approaches to things. And it's good to have that, it's good for me to have that in our department too. That way, when questions arise about lead and copper, or future questions will be arising about PFAS in the near future. You all are fully aware of that. But, and, items like that, a single point of contact, but also it allows that person to have at least 2 to maybe even 4 other employees underneath them that can help deliver those programs. So as far as preventative maintenance, you would have your electrician on schedule to go around the different facilities, different pump stations around the city and determine what needs to be done for those particular pump stations to keep them in compliance and also operable. As opposed to, worst case scenario, something goes down in the middle of the night, now the pump station overflows, right? So which is what you want to try to not have happen. And then the utility inspector could work underneath that same program administrator and review construction plans and development plans, and then provide recommendations to me as a director as far as acceptance or things that need to go back to the contractor or the developer that need to be changed or modified to the plans to meet our specs. And then also utility specialist, which our particular utility specialist has both water and sewer experience and classifications. So that person would be detrimental to work with that program administrator from a preventive maintenance standpoint from both water and sewer side of things. So your air release valves, just valves in general throughout the water distribution system, your pump stations around town for sanitary sewer, manholes around the system. As far as identifying those critical aspects that need to be updated or modified or, addressed from a preventive maintenance standpoint. And get those on schedule, right? Get the towers on schedule, painting, upgrades to the water towers. If a tower may need to be replaced in the future, you want to get that on a long-term schedule based on funding needs, stuff like that. And then, of course, the SCADA administrator, we're migrating more and more into a technological age, and we've got SCADA, which is the computer program that allows the water plant, for example, to see the water levels in the towers around our system. So if you have a main break in the middle of the night, that main break may not be reported just yet by the public or whomever, or our folks, personnel's out in the field, but you may see the water tank on 4th Street, for example, start to drop rapidly. And you're like, oh my gosh, we may have a water main break. So you send the guys out to do that and look for that. But all that can be done consolidated into a computer program at the water plant, right? Well, we're going to do the same thing with the pump stations around our system for the wastewater plant, all the wastewater pump stations. So if a pump goes down or something, or we have over or high level alarms go off in the pump station, it sends a notification back to the wastewater plant. So we've got folks that manage that, but also it needs to be managed from a water and a sewer programmatically approach to that, right? All of that's about preventative maintenance and addressing things from a programmatic standpoint. So what would that do for utilities in general? That would allow me as a utility director to focus on the budget, the capital project funding and delivery, more personnel, grant funding, community and leadership communications, special interest committees. I'm on a lot of these different committees and meetings about meetings, right? Well, and then also, we've got a lot of policies. We've got a lot of policies that need to be updated in utilities too. There's a lot of policies that were maybe drafted back, years ago that doesn't necessarily meet the needs of the customer base, but also the utilities in general, from a modern perspective. So that program administrator would allow me to focus on some of those key items from a directorship standpoint, but also allow more concise effort on the preventive maintenance side over here on the other side of the spectrum, right? And then, so that's an immediate, discussion right now, future fiscal 25 right now. And then possibly adding maybe another class 4 operator at the water plant also. We right now, we've got a need across the board, one of which is a future, maybe fiscal year 26, adding an employee to the wastewater collections, to Lindsay Yoakum's crew out there. And then another approach too, and this is a fiscal 26 discussion, would be the executive assistant, but also possibly in the future creating these two key positions here, a wastewater superintendent and a water system superintendent over both water and sewer in general. So, and by doing that, it provides a centralized point of contact for regulatory compliance and departmental oversight. So if we had permitting issues or we have any issues with Division of Water or EPA or anything like that, it gives those regulatory authorities single points of contact. If it's a water-related issue with the permit, they can go to that person and figure out what the issue is, or what are you all doing to come back into compliance, for example. Or if it's a wastewater issue, if it's a permitting issue, that would give that person, the regulatory authority, the ability to reach out to a specific person on the sewer side. And then also that executive assistant in the future, talking about fiscal 26 again, that executive assistant would help provide administrative support to me as a director regarding memos, letters, grant applications, contract procurement, and provide some additional billing support for the utilities billing manager also. So the immediate ask is the future fiscal 25s here and here, and then further conversations down the road would be the fiscal 26s in these locations, the executive assistant, and then possibly the water and the wastewater superintendent over both disciplines, and then possibly adding another employee to the wastewater collections department.
So this conversation is, the logic of this conversation is, we see the demand for the conversation popping up because we have such turnover right now with our admin of utilities. You have to go back really 30 years to look at how the utilities, water and wastewater utilities have changed. In the early 2000 to 2010 era, you had a consolidation of utilities. And so your field personnel, the demand was on your field personnel across the board. And that was a state-driven function. The city of Danville ended up with Perryville and Junction City under its ownership. As an example, when I first came, the structure that we have before, on the slide before this, without the electrician, without some of those positions, is really an organizational chart dated circa 1998, to be honest with you. Once we started growing in the field, we added field employees, and then we added assistant superintendents to those departments. That was our initial reaction. Now that we've grown, 4 or 5 years ago, 4 years ago now, we formed the utility administration department and tried to add begin adding administrative support at that level. We added the electrician, for example. We added the utility specialist position in this side of the equation. So as you're now at this crossroad where you're seeing a lot of turnover in your major department heads, and granted, we just hired the water plant superintendent, but it's a good chance to look at your organizational chart and really do a deeper dive into how you're going to, what does the modern utility look like? And as you can see from the lead and copper rule changes, PFAS coming, the administrative demand, the technical capacity you have to have at your middle management and up is increased dramatically. And I think so the purpose of this organizational chart is to align our revised structure with that modern demand where our time needs to be spent in order to be an operational and compliant utility in the future. It's the pressure on the wastewater side is immense with the way the state now is. Lexington has had a consent decree for a number of years on their wastewater system. They weren't allowed to expand for a long time. Then they've signed their federal order. They have to spend, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in this certain time frame. So the Division of Water has really gotten down into cities our size now, and they're wanting to establish that agreed order relationships. And I know we've got one pending that we'll have to bring back to you on the wastewater side with an effort to be compliant with the Clean Water Act. That's 50 years old now, ultimately, and how the EPA has refined those regulations. So what we're asking for, given our current staffing position, is to go ahead and make the immediate change, and not tonight, we'll come back to the next meeting. We wanted to make sure we had this dialogue, just like we did the personnel policies. But what we would ask you to do is permit us to go ahead and develop this program administrator for all those loose and heavy programs that require specific administrative responsibilities that are new and not necessarily in Marshall's capacity to do, just in terms of man hours a week. So we'd ask to add that position in the current fiscal year, and then continue to keep open mind about overhiring a Class 4 operator as we see in the system. We'll bring that back to you when that opportunity, if that opportunity presented itself. But meanwhile, plant the seed in the budget process next year. We will probably try to financially transition to this revised structure and get your all's review of that during the budget process next year. Is that fair, Marshall, for me to add? I mean,
That's good. Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Carrier?
So you said on the water, the fire hydrants or whatever, the hydrants, this position would oversee it. Who does the maintenance on those?
Well, we typically do a lot of the maintenance on those right now. I mean,
Okay.
it's been a discussion over the years with the fire department, about who maintains. If it's below the ground, it's usually the utilities. If it's at or above the ground, it was usually the fire departments. But some of it's migrated away over the years into more of a role of the utilities.
Utility.
So,
But
I just know that
let's
he had
remember
said
this,
there's a lot.
that's thoroughly confused too. We've always looked at that issue locally as, well, what are we doing as if it's our management policy? The governing agencies, like the Public Service Commission, has been very clear that a water system is for drinking water and not necessarily for fire protection. If you can add fire protection, that's an advantage. And the reason it's like that is because there are a lot of water lines that are in the ground that can't support fire hydrants because of their flow. And so it was to avoid that in just idea that, well, we're just gonna put a hydrant everywhere and then we'll get cheaper insurance rates. You can't have that. And so a utility then, once a hydrant is a mile towards somebody's house, not necessarily that's happened here, but the idea is that you can't ask a PSC-regulated utility to replace that water line to maintain a hydrant so that somebody gets cheaper insurance rates on their fire protection. That's
I'm
not.
only asking, no.
I know, all I'm saying, I understand your point, but I want to say that just
Okay.
because that's a big policy thing. And we've never really fully vetted that here. We've always just horse traded with the fire department who's taking care of it. We do have a fire protection fee. If you want to start that program, that fire protection fee may need to be raised.
See, I don't know, I just was asking because I know he had
Right.
mentioned in the past that there's a lot of hydrants that don't work, which we don't want that to be happening.
Correct.
So I would, and I know we put some in, maybe in Perryville recently, or,
yeah, with
And people
with the
about-
new water line through Perryville.
right.
Put in like
So,
14 or 15.
Okay, just a question. So,
Yeah, so we do need to, we need to reconcile how the hydrants are going to be maintained, who's going to track that. We can contract it out too. That's something that is easy to contract with. And so, I wanted to say that, Marshall, I'm sorry. But
No, that's good.
just because we never really fully vetted that.
Oh, well.
And most people use the water utility, and that's a general fund expense, theoretically. It's supposed to be a general fund expense if it's above ground fire hydrants, which is why then the fire protection fee was always theoretically passed to the general fund in the operations transfer. And so that is why that was set up like that with the fire protection fee. That's why that fire protection fee is on your water bill.
Are there other questions or comments about the reorganization proposal that's before us? From the commission, any other comments or questions?
The position asked for, is it promotion from within or new hire?
Now, that would be advertised as a
Okay.
open hire, so.
Yeah, it would be a new hire, and in the short term, in the budget year we're in, if you authorize us to do that, what we would do is leave the assistant at the water plant position probably vacant for a little bit until we got further towards like February range, to where we saw where we're at budget-wise, and then come back to you and at an appropriate time in the future that we knew our budget to ask to go ahead and hire that assistant job at that time. Otherwise, it's a budget discussion next year. Our thinking is by January, February, we're going to know where we're going to end up, and we would love to get that position, go ahead and rehire that position. But this is a new position.
Other questions or comments? We'll just come back for the next meeting and for us to make a decision on the next meeting, right?
As long as you all don't reject the idea that Marshall's proposing. Yeah.
Well, I see he's proposing potentially 2 new positions in the organizational chart for fiscal year '25, and then possibly 4 for fiscal year '26. The question I was dying to ask is, we talk about all the expansion of our water program. These will sort of help prepare us for those expansions as well.
Yeah, they will.
All right. Okay, let's move along then. Next item is Resolution 2024-10-1402, the Mox Creek Pump Station bid award. Marshall?
Thank you, Mayor. Earlier this year, the city of Danville received statements, SOQs from engineering firms related to the design, preparation, contract documents, and services during bidding and construction of the Mox Creek sanitary sewer pump station. This is the one near the toe of the slope at the Hunt Farm entrance on Bergen Road. So that kind of gives you some type of understanding. The Mox Creek Sanitary Sewer Pump Station Rehab Project will include various wet well, valve, vault, and other improvements. This may be funded primarily by the American Rescue Plan Act, the ARPA money, the city ARPA funds, and will be subject to the requirements of that particular funding program. So just to kind of drill down just a little bit, we're talking about, it's essentially a rehab project. This is not a capacity addition project for the city. This is just a rehabbing the wet wells, a lot of the valves, a lot of the piping, some of the drains in the wet wells, and so on and so on. So it can be done in pretty short order from a design standpoint and turned around and led to construction fairly quickly, we feel like. Financial impacts, approximately $170,500 from the city ARPA funds for design and contract administration.
Okay, questions or comments? Oh, I guess I should ask for a motion on Resolution 2014-10-1402. Is there a motion?
Move for, go ahead.
No,
Go,
go
go, 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 go.
I move for approval.
Second.
All right, been approved and second. Now, are there other questions or discussion for this resolution?
How old was that pump station?
Oh, gosh.
That was like a 07 to 09 era
Okay.
is when it was built. It was a couple years in developing. Some of the developers paid for it. It was a pretty big
Right.
expansion.
Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
that. Is that pretty much the life of one, or?
That one particularly had a rough beginning life with, to answer your question, yes, 15 years, 20 years in there, it's over. But that one had a rough beginning because the prison was the only flow for the longest time. And it was very corrosive, just because there was no dilution. Now you get a lot more flow through it, and it's a little bit more stable.
I was just curious.
Other questions, comments? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Mr. Curry.
Thank you all.
Mr. Morgan, Josh, you have the next two items.
Yes, we should be able to do these pretty quick. Funding applications are due tomorrow for the KYTC County Priority Projects Program. It's kind of additional way that the state legislatures put funding towards cities and county paving projects primarily. Could be bridge projects, really anything related to roads. One of the things they identified in the application was economic development. So after our discussion about the paving list recently, we think that the corporate drive resurfacing is a good project to apply for here. JJ Harris is here. They're putting together a letter of support for us to submit with it as well. So we're going to request $250,000, and it doesn't specify a match, which is always a dangerous thing to put on a grant application. But we're going to recommend that the city put $50,000 towards the project. So then we'd be requesting $200,000, and then we can fund that out of our municipal road aid fund.
Thank you, sir. Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve Resolution 2024-1014-03.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, sir. Sir? Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Those opposed, motion carries. Next item, Mr. Morgan.
Yes, in your package, you have the form that we request disbursement number 3 from the Kentucky Cabinet for Economic Development for the Kentucky Product Development Initiative grant that the EDA received, but the city is acting as the grantee for the project. This is for the full amount remaining, which is $334,882.70. We've not spent this money yet, but since they're using ARPA money to fund this, that needs to be done by the end of the year, they're asking us to go ahead and submit this paperwork. But we plan to have the money spent by the end of the year. I was discussing it with our consultant today. They have the design pretty much complete for the culvert/bridge that will go over the creek onto the property, the Norfolk Southern property. So we'll bid that out fairly soon and be able to purchase that culvert ahead of time, which will cover the remainder of the funds that we need to spend.
Thank you, sir. Chair would like to entertain a motion.
I move to pass resolution number 2024-101404.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, ma'am. Questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. The last two items on our agenda were removed, so that completes our printed agenda.
Fortunately, we don't have an executive.
Say what?
Unfortunately, we don't have an executive.
Oh, okay, well, the chair.
We do have a request, Commissioner Cottle,
Anyway, Chair
for
would-
property acquisition and personnel.
Nice try, Commissioner Cottle. I was gonna second it for you, but Chair would like to entertain a motion to go into executive session.
What was it? Property acquisition
Personnel.
And personnel.
and fire away.
You were smooth, buddy.
I'll do it. Personnel,
Right.
I just do the top row, right? I'll make a motion to go into executive session to discuss personnel matter pursuant to KRS 61.8101F, and a motion to go into executive session for potential real estate acquisition for which publicity at present stage might or would be likely to affect the value per KRS 61.8101B.
That was very well done.
It died for.
Well done. Second.
Oh. Been properly moved in second, we're going to executive session, all those you all. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, city manager, you have a couple items for us tonight?
I do. Staff is recommending the hiring of Elise Meunier to the position of accounts payable.
Could you repeat that name, please?
No, sir. Let's go with what I said the first time.
So moved, so moved.
Is there a second? Thank you all.
Elise Meunier.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, motion carries. Next item.
Staff is recommending the promotion of Chris Reynolds to the position of water distribution superintendent.
Is there a
So
motion?
moved.
Thank you, ma'am.
Second.
Thank you, sir. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Chair, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in